Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Welcome to our listeners and viewers worldwide. I'm here with Chair Gary Gensler in his office in Washington, D.C. Great to speak with you.
Great to be with you, David.
You've had a very active agenda during your tenure here. I want to get to as much of that as I can, but I want to start first just by asking you how you're feeling here with less than 2 weeks left in your term. You have been subject to a fair amount of attacks, some vitriol. How have you processed all of that?
It's a great privilege to be in a role like this. I'm the 33rd chair, and it's a big country. A lot of people could do this job, so I start with it's just such a privilege to be here, and thank you to Joe Biden for asking me to do it. But what's remarkable about this role is it oversees the $120 trillion capital market, which touches everything in our economy, because you've got to raise money for most of what we do in our economy, and people save. So I feel terrific. And you ask about the attacks and things like that. That's what public policy is about. You walk into this central square and you debate these important things for 330 million Americans. I've worked over the years with Hillary Clinton on a number of campaigns, and I remember Hillary saying once, like, if you're not willing to be attacked, you can't go into the public square and debate policy. And so I think it's part of our great democracy.
I look at who is inveighing against you and who's throwing that invective, and it's the president-elect, it's the world's richest man. Does it feel different to you than what you, I'm sure, experienced after the global financial crisis when you were at the CFTC? Has the atmosphere, has the environment changed for regulators like yourself?
Well, I think it does change. What we do here at this great agency is look out for everyday Americans, people just trying to save for a better future and try to move through things that help them, like we've done, like even shortening the settlement cycle from 2 days to 1 day. Might sound geeky behind the scenes, but it means you get your money 1 day faster, for instance, or getting privacy notices. There was no federal rule that you needed to get a notice if your data was hacked, and we put in place some rules to do that. So we're looking out for everyday Americans, trying to lower the cost of the markets to trade stocks, to trade bonds. But it doesn't surprise me that then there's some in the middle of the market. They're called brokers, they're called dealers, they're called intermediaries, stock exchanges, who they like their business model. And if we're changing the rules to benefit everyday Americans, they might have thoughts on that and object. And that's part of the process. But our clients ultimately, people at their kitchen tables.
Let me ask you about one facet of that $120 million trillion.
Trillion. It's a big number.
It's a T, with a T, and that's crypto. And you often will point out it's a small sliver of that total multi-trillion-dollar package. But you came into this job, you gave a big speech in which you analogized the crypto world to the Wild West. I guess that makes you the sheriff. So as you get ready to hang up your spurs, is it less of a Wild West? I'm really belaboring the metaphor, but is it less of a Wild West than it was as you leave this office?
My daughters, if they ever watch this interview, will ask, "Where are your spurs, Dad?" I think that we've done some good things. Look, I came in, my predecessor, Jay Clayton, who was in this office, had also tried to address this new emerging part of finance. And as you say, it's less than 1% of our overall financial markets. But it was then when Jay was trying to address it, and he brought 80 enforcement actions in this area. We've brought in about 100 in our 4 years. It was consistent. It's maybe about 5% of what we do in our law enforcement. That means there's 95%, in a sense, unfortunately, about other things, scammers and fraudsters and so forth. But in this field, it's rife with bad actors. And let me just split the field into two just for a minute. The public knows a lot about Bitcoin, which is, depending upon its market value on any given day, is 2/3 to 80% of the market value of crypto. And then there's everything else, or some people say Bitcoin and Ethereum and everything else. These 10 or 15,000 projects, they're raising money from the public, and the public's investing, or the public's investing hoping for a better future. I've been around finance for over 4 decades, and everything in the markets trade on a mixture of fundamentals and sentiment at any given time. But I've never seen a field that's so much wrapped up in sentiment and not so much about fundamentals. And these 10,000 to 15,000 projects, many of them will not survive. They're like venture capital investments. They're not going to survive. But there are also a fair number of small pump and dump schemes and other things in this. And of course, we've lived through a few years where, they became notorious, but they're in jail, the Sam Bankman-Frieds and the CZs and the Do Kwons, where tens of billions of dollars were lost by investors.
Can I ask you about those? Because early on when you talked about enforcement, you said bringing high-profile cases could lead to a change in behavior. Are you satisfied that those cases has led to a change in behavior in this space in particular?
It's a field that built up around non-compliance. And I'm proud of what we've done, building on what Chair Clayton and others had done previously. I think there's still work to be done, particularly I'm saying about these 10 or 15,000 alternative coins that are there, and the intermediaries themselves. I think there's still work to be done. And I think the public is probably aware of this, and less than 10% of the public invests in this field. I think various Federal Reserve, and even we did a survey here, these public figures at somewhere between 7 and 9% of the public. Should be aware these are highly speculative, volatile investments, and they're not getting the full and fair disclosure that's appropriate. What we're about here at the Securities and Exchange Commission for 90 years is letting the public decide what they want to invest in. And secondly, that the intermediaries, the brokers, the stock exchanges, the advisors, are giving that advice and doing what they're doing without fraud, manipulation, and so forth.
Settle something for me, because I think when you came into office, a lot of people looked at your immediate background, having researched a lot of digital assets, worked on them at MIT, and thought that you would be perhaps a champion of them. Has there been an evolution in the way that you approach crypto over that transition from academia to here, or while you've been
here? Here's the evolution.
People think you are somebody who's adamantly opposed to
Here's the evolution. When you're in academia or when you're not in this job, you can study something and observe it, as I did, and try to teach students what's the value proposition about this new technology, what's the value proposition of this new investment vehicles. But then when you're in this job, this is a chair of a 5-member commission over roughly 5,000 people that's a law enforcement agency. And so now one gets in this chair, building upon my predecessor had brought 80 cases, so we brought about 100. And this is a field rife with challenges and non-compliance with the securities laws. So sometimes people, you take an oath of office, you do what you can to protect the investing public.
Just another question about evolution of thinking, turning to the climate-related rules that have been passed by the SEC. Some say that you fashioned yourself as kind of a climate crusader.
No.
Are they wrong in that supposition?
I haven't heard that. I'm a securities guy. I was at Goldman Sachs for 18 years, a fair number of years ago now. And I deeply believe in markets. And I came into a role that there were some outsiders that said, use the securities laws to promote an agenda, but we're just a securities regulator, and I deeply believe that. But what we found is that not just hundreds, but over 1,000 companies were already making disclosures to their investors about climate risks. And I'm very proud of the work we did to bring some consistency in those disclosures, all based in materiality, meaning the only thing that the various investors need to look to, or the only thing the public companies would need to do is to make disclosures about their material greenhouse gas emissions, and not their supply chain, just their emissions and how they manage certain risk in that field. One interesting number, of the top 1,000 companies in the U.S. and the capital markets, what percentage of them do you think already make greenhouse gas disclosures?
No, is the majority?
It's over 60%. And so investors, we heard from not just hundreds, but thousands of investors that say they make decisions over those material disclosures. So our role is just to try to bring some consistency to that.
Chair Gensler and I are going to keep talking. The full interview will be available on the Big Take podcast.